Well, good morning, all. Thank you so much for joining part three of our four-part training series, Basics and Best Practices. And today we have with us Bonnie Filer, and she is going to go over our User Experience Insights, UXI, one of our most popular solutions. And I'm really excited about this training because many of you have asked for additional training, onboarding. You have lots of questions. You want to take the information that you are able to run reports and turn those into actionable items. So Bonnie is going to go into depth. We have about a 2-hour dense training. At the end, she may have some time to answer questions. Please enter your questions in the chat section and the Q&A section. And we will get back to you if we are unable to and run out of time today. We will get back to you in writing via email. And we thank you so much for joining part three. Again, my name is Brianna Gennaro. I am the territory manager for part of NorCal. I share that territory with another sales representative. And the Southwest commercial team is putting on this series for you. And we really appreciate your participation and attendance. And without further ado, Bonnie Filer.
Cool. Thank you very much for that overview there. Maybe I should stop sharing for a second and see who all, because I know there's a mix of people who have UXI already and don't have it, aren't familiar with it. So I don't want to be repetitive. So maybe I could, if you guys can put in chat if you've heard of UXI. Maybe that's the first question. Have you all heard of UXI? Yes? No? Maybe so? Yep. Okay. That's good. So, heard of it, heard of it, heard of it. Okay. Do you want me to start with how it works and then dive into a demo and reporting and stuff? I'll skip over the why we exist. Two new texts here with me. Okay, cool. Okay.
And Bonnie, we may have a mixture of attendees today.
Yeah.
Some might be viewing this for the very first time. So if you are able to do a little bit of a solution overview as you had planned, that probably is a good idea because we have some that have the solution already and others, that are looking at it for the first time.
I know, it's tricky, right? You try not to,
It is.
You don't want to be repetitive for folks. So I'll go back to here and we'll just kind of do a quick baseline, get everyone on the same page, and then dive into the best practices of using it and whatnot. So as Will mentioned, let's see, there we go. Almost gave control to everybody, which would have been fine. I could have you guys do the demo. So UXI, which I'll start with, we used to be Cape Networks. We were acquired by Aruba about 5 years ago, and they, marketing powers to be, decided to call us User Experience Insight, otherwise known as UXI, or if you live in Europe, it's called UXI, and that's what happens when you use acronyms in other languages. So it's all to address all the IoT and the fact of folks going to more of an SD-WAN environment where things are on the cloud, application-wise and network-wise. The fact that you lose visibility when you move to the cloud, that's really where UXI got its strength. COVID pushed a lot of that because everybody went home, and a lot of organizations needed to support new applications that they weren't supporting. And then in education, if you look at it from this perspective of students testing and things like that, the tablets that came into the play, it was all busy at the edge. So we needed to be able to test from the edge inward. And if you're ever looking for some reading on it, Gartner has a nice technology overview to say that really pinpoints how disruptive these edge technologies can be, and how it is important to not just test from the core of the network inbound. Like if you're a central user, having network metrics that come from central. Is the AP working? Is there channel plays from an AP perspective, power plays and stuff like that? That's good, but how do you know when all these other issues happen and people complain and they're just kind of transient? That it all of a sudden somebody, all they know is they can't do something that they're trying to do, and they're in the cafeteria or they're in a classroom. They don't necessarily know, sometimes they don't even know what network they're on. They certainly don't know if DHCP is working. All they know is they can't do something, so they immediately blame the wireless. And as we all know, the wireless is typically pretty good, as is the wired. That's not typically the problem that is actually at hand. But since there's no visibility into any of the other tools or any of the other pieces of the puzzle, end users don't know where to go. And as a result, IT teams don't necessarily, where do they start? Who knows how to start troubleshooting a random complaint or a complaint that came in, they just chunked it into another conversation. Last week I was trying to do Gmail and it didn't work, or last week I was trying to get to this application and it kept failing. So the idea is that UXI provides that strength and that tool for the visibility. And I'll show you that in just a couple seconds here. In that it really, because of the way it tests and it's constantly testing from the same area over and over and over, it sees things before the user does. It sees things before the network says there's a problem. So it tends to see things. It's interesting even when like Facebook has an outage, UXI tends to report it about 15 minutes earlier than what the public report is that would come from Facebook. Granted, I'm sure they have all kinds of validations that they have to go through before they make their announcement, but we have seen that in the behavior of UXI. So the way it works is that if you think of a remote site or a classroom or a campus, when there's a problem, you would normally send somebody out there. If instead of sending somebody out, you had the sensor, and I tried to get my camera to come on and it brought my laptop camera on, but it's a hardened Linux device, cylinder-shaped sensor that you plug into the wall or you plug into PoE, and it's just sitting there onboarding the wired network that it's told to test or a wireless network. Any vendor, doesn't matter. This could be in a Starbucks. It doesn't matter where it's at. And it goes through the whole DORA process, DHCP, DNS. If there's a captive portal, it will log into that captive portal and log back out of the captive portal. And it's measuring each one of these steps of everything it does. Once it gets on the network, it then starts testing things that are important to that user, depending on what site they're in. Think of internal tests. It'll test like, printers or authentication servers. And then it starts testing applications. It'll log into your website or log into Workday or log into the student's application. And it's measuring all these things as it goes along. If it fails, it goes back and it retests, and it has a recorder, and I'll show you this, that provides a triage. So that triage gives you, traceroute, curl files, shows you exactly how long each step took and where it failed. All of these test results are reported over to a dashboard, which you can use, or you could just export everything to, Splunk or Elasticsearch or some container or some other reporting tool that you use. Or you could just offload the alerts as well. So there's different ways to handle it, and we'll go into that. But in a nutshell, that's what it does. We support this on Zebra as well, which I don't know, probably not a lot of Zebra users on this call, but it's basically a sensor. The Zebra device turns into a sensor. We just announced additional support for generically Android, iOS, MacBooks, and Windows. All these, they're not in beta yet. The beta should be happening, I think, in the next few months. But we're expanding as we go. So in a nutshell, And I'll stop and see, is there any questions? This is what UXI does. And I can't see because I'm sharing my screen, so Brianna, you'll have to tell me if there's any questions that pop up.
No
Okay.
questions.
No questions. So it all makes sense. So the result of that testing, because that sensor sits in the same spot every day doing the same thing, the result is you could create baselines. I know DHCP response time is X for the past 7 days, or DHCP had a spike after we did, X change to a server, or when all the students came back. I can start to trend and baseline what the impact is of change on my network, whether that change is network side or whether that change is, environmental. It's change. And the whole idea is to be able to get ahead of what's happening. And as I mentioned, something like web app testing, the triage that it gives you is pretty cool in that, web app is a test you create, and I'll show you that. But then it shows you each click of that test that you created. And if the click was out of sync with the timing of the test you created, it'll present you with the page that said, this page was presented incorrectly, or it took too long to present this page, or whatever the problem is. So it really does give you that visibility to say if things are good or bad. And I won't go into, I'll just show you all of this. But this is a snapshot of what triage looks like. So we'll look at this in more detail on the actual dashboard. And we'll also know about AI ops, which depending on how many sensors for you who are using UXI, when you get to having 20 sensors on your dashboard, there's some AI apps that goes into play in that the sensor or the system is able to learn about the behavior of sensors. And it takes about 5 different algorithms into play about, the time that an event happens and how many sensors it happens on. And it develops instead of sending you individual alerts for each one of the incidents or problems that occur, it'll send you a notice, and you can see how many groups is it on that issue's happening on, and how much of each one of those groups that it is impacting, how many networks are being impacted, and what's the service that's being impacted. And then it'll take you to triage. But this is a nice, clean package that goes to the NOC or goes to the ticket team or whatever your workflow is. You could send that over, and then they could get a very targeted message to say, do I care about this or not care about this? Or if I'm a field person and I get alerts, or I can look at the incidents from the dashboard, then do I care about the groups that are being impacted or not? Or is this something that I'm making changes to? Just gives you a very clean way to target, to troubleshoot events that have happened. And then we have reports, which I'll show you how to generate. We just did some recent enhancements to it. And that it used to just be a weekly report that came out every Monday. Now you can customize it to reoccur whenever you want it to, as well as you can pull a report on your own. So that's been a nice little simple enhancement that we added out. And then also data push. If you have UXI and you haven't tried messing around with this yet, you may want to, because there's always phases with UXI. People start to use it more, it seems, that they'll get it at the same time they're doing some sort of change to a network. And they want the sensors out there first to do site validation, and then they make the network change, and then, then we've got all the sensors out. Now all my network changes are done. Now I want to operationalize things. I want to measure the performance of all these changes I made. And at that point is when the data really becomes fun, because each sensor pulls 20,000, on average, 20,000 tests a day. So each tick of every test is available for you to do with what you want. And believe me, people do all kinds of things. It just depends on what your business wants to measure, or maybe it's when you're what's next? I'm going to roll out a new application, or we know there's a new test or online something that's going to require certain measurements or certain, throughput levels at a site, I want to start trending for that to make sure I'm ready for it, or make sure the new site I built is ready for it. So with that, you can stream all these incidents off to a container of your choice, and then, do with what you want at that point. And I had some, it could be simple, like we're having a customer who wanted to compare all of their remote sites, and they have two ISPs, and they were having throughput issues. So they wanted to say, what is the up-down performance? Are they meeting the SLAs at each of these sites? So we ran a lever speed test and to each site and started to trend that data. Then one of the carriers said, okay, we're not meeting the SLAs because of this the device they had in the network that was causing the latency. So the customer said, fine, we'll move those sites to the SD-WAN environment now, and we'll start to measure it that way. So they were measuring both ISPs and the SD-WANs, and the data was interesting in that, the SD-WAN didn't necessarily perform better all of the time, and the one carrier was actually doing pretty good, and the other one had some issues, but the data was there, all the data. There was nobody like called it out to say, no, you're wrong, because it was actually just data points that we had over and over. So it was pretty cool. Different ways, some people will compare the web applications. Everybody's got their own thing that they want to do. So in a nutshell, this is what UXI does. It's help you get better insights so that you can, have recommendations and automation in a simple, clean way. So from there, this is the dashboard. I've got two that I'm going to work from today. This one was very sad as I was bringing these up just before this, and then this one's having a better day. He's happy. So these are my dashboards. These are demo sites that so they're a little overkill from the testing perspective. And as I mentioned, here's all of my sites, and I've got some groups created in these sites, and that you can go 7 layers deep if I wanted to look at my groups. I don't know if any of these are like that. Most of these look to be just 2 or 3 layers deep. Some customers, they'll go 3 or 4 layers, I would say, is kind of the average. And they'll also, name their groups according to, some people name them by data center size, or, they have a physical location, or they have different types. Maybe we have main campus versus branch, or everybody's different. It's kind of whatever your workflow is how you start to name it. And it could change over time too, depending on how you're using UXI. We just had that with another customer who's been in operational mode until just now, and they're like, from a NOC perspective, these orderings don't make any sense. It's just software, so we just renamed everything and kind of resorted it, and there it was. When I hover over, I can see everything that's happening for the last 24 hours for that particular group, and I can drill down into it and start to get more details. And you can see it's showing me, like in this group, what I'm actually testing. So it's not the same for everybody. You're going to test what's relevant. These are the services. So we've got, everybody's logging into wireless. The sensors don't have to test wireless if you don't want them to. Each sensor can test 4 networks. And we put that limitation in there just so you could create a baseline that was relevant. And you'll see as we look at the details of the dashboard. But, if you were testing 10 networks on one sensor, your baseline, it may only run a test cycle 2 or 3 times a day, which would somewhat skew a baseline measurement for most people. So 4 seems to work for the majority of our population. All sensors don't need to be testing everything, except 9 of these 23 sensors are testing Ethernet as well. This is the DHCP. We do support IPv6. So this goes through the whole DORA process here. And if there was a captive portal on this network, it would be listed right down here as a captive portal, and we'd have load and redirect times for each one of those. These are my internal tests. In this case, we've just got some samples of things that run the business, things that need to be operating for everybody at that site to work is the way to think about these internal tests. And then we've got external tests, and these should be more cloud-facing applications. You see we've got probably some VoIP running here. Let's say we have Teams running, Netflix, that's a throughput test, fast.com. Watch out, it'll take as much as you give it, so make sure when you create that test you do put the throttles in the day, how many times a day to run it. Yeah, we have a little bit of mixture of everything. This is a web application test, and that is actually logging into FedEx's website and going to a certain page and then logging back out. So if the pattern of the sensor is to log into the network, get on whatever network I'm supposed to run, and test each one of these one after another. When it's done, it releases that IP address, goes back, it gets on the next network. So it just does this in a loop fashion all day long. And that looks like the test results, if I were to look at them, looks like, let's see, this. So this is the Sandton lobby, and it is testing these 4 networks here. You can see 2 Ethernet, 2 wireless that are being tested. And by default, when you look at these test results, you're looking at the last 24 hours of everything happening. I can go back 30 days and get any data that I need to get test result wise, packet captures, stuff like that. When I hover over, you can see it's the line on the right side is also moving as well, and this one didn't have a lot of issues happening, but you can see when I hit to the red, it highlights what exactly was the issue at the time. I can click right there and lock in to everything at this one time. When this issue happened, what was it? I can see how it was connected. Let's see if there was channel plays. Everything looks like it stayed on the same channel. These are the DHCP DNS measurements, and I'm seeing the specific measurement right there. If I were to unclick this, when I look at this, I'm looking at the average over that period of time that I'm hovered in. Here's my throughput test, up, down, as well as internal, external. If I wanted to look at throughput, and I think I'm just running the 2 tests, yeah, it's just the Libre speed. So let me look at something that's got, let's look at DHCP, no, let's see, latency here. These are my internal test results. So these are all the tests that were in that internal bucket that we looked at on the dashboard. These are the results for each one of those tests. Now, in this case, they all kind of look like they're performing about the same. The question would be, if one of these was spiked higher than all the rest of them, would be, why is that? Is it site specific? Is it test specific? What's causing that to perform differently? And I would probably look at, like a little spike, and I would lock in and see if at the same time, did something on the network side also happen? Or did it have a low connection at that time? Or, channel plan change, something. So just the whole idea of having this data is to start to give you some sort of visual as to what's happening. Where is it happening? Is it just related to the application? Is it related to the network? Like at the same time, everything took a spike? Or is it more, user friendly? Like the sensor's been testing everything fine, all the tests are working fine, yet the user's having a problem, meaning there's a problem with the user. So that's how we start to use this data. This is the visualization, meaning this is the environment of all the other networks that the sensor's seen. And you would see, let's see if there's any that's highlighted. The ones that are highlighted are being tested by the sensor, and it'll be a blue, a white, maybe this particular, because I'm in the expanded mode, it'll blue, white, or green tells me if I'm about to test it, or I'm currently testing it, or I just tested it. And this little tool here, the visualization to all of the channel environment, has sort of turned into, for some locations, instead of sending somebody out with a Wi-Fi analyzer to do or a survey to do that first sweep of everything, they utilize the data from the sensor, because all the sensors are reporting things back at the same level, the same version. It's testing it the same way. There's no deviations that are going to come if they've got, let's say, 5 different people using 5 different Wi-Fi analyzers or survey tools. So it's kind of you wouldn't think there'd be that much value to having visualization to this, but it's actually turned into a pretty big deal to have that. And I can filter things and look at just different plans if I wanted to of all these networks that are being tested or being seen by the sensor. This is the About section, which doesn't sound like much either, except for it's shocking how often, it's why is it connecting to that DHCP, or why is this the DNS it received? Those types of details, kind of become telling. The sensor does packet captures in a couple ways. It will, all of these incidents that, well, not all of them, the sensor reports 2 types of alerts: threshold violations and then failed tests. The failures that it gets, it goes back, returns that recorder on. That's what it grabs a packet capture of over time, and those things are available for 30 days. The threshold violations, like, let's see if I have this high DHCP response time. For example, this is what this would look like. So here's, you can see as I scroll over, I don't know where the error, usually it's highlighted where the issue is. I have to assume it's right there. But this is a sample of what a threshold violation looks like versus let's find this one. So this is triage, and this is what we store back in time, and it would have a packet capture of this if it's enabled on this one. So I can see this particular test. There was a web app that failed. It was failing for 4 hours on this network. That sensor. It's still happening, actually. And this is the telling information that nobody can ever provide to IT or anybody that says how I was associated to the network. Here's the AP name. Here's the country. All of the details of how that sensor was connected. And then it steps through. I actually was able to associate to the wireless. So, step 1 was good. I got on the network. Here's the DHCP, DNS information, gateway was reachable, name server. Here's a trace route, which, by the way, we're about to put a visual to this, so you could have this more as a path visualization instead of, having to figure out what the AS number means and, what vendor is that and that kind of stuff. And then in this case, all targets failed. So in this particular case, here's my commands, and I'll show you in a second how we created this report. And you can see it presented us with this page, and it wasn't supposed to get to this page. It was supposed to be something different that it received as per the recording. So that's where the failure was. Here's the raw data to that. And then this triage, it ran it on the wireless, and then right here, it restarts that triage test on the Ethernet as well. So it will say, this failed on the wireless, but it appears, since there's no failure here, that it did work on the Ethernet. So why is that? Now we know it's just the wireless that it's failing on. It's working fine on Ethernet. I could download a packet capture to this, export it all as a text file, copy any of this, send it to the app team, that type of stuff, or network team, whichever is more appropriate. And I could do this back in time. So I don't have to be here live while it's happening. Although, if I want to be here live and get a packet capture of everything that's going on right now on the sensor, that's where I would do this request PCAP. And this would be a way to, maybe find, some issue with DHCP is happening like right now, but you can't find it back in time, or I don't know. There's a bunch of reasons to run them right now, but that is a possibility to do. And those are not stored. You can just request a PCAP. It'll show up here, and then it's available for download from there. So that is the status page. Any questions? Awfully quiet.
Yes, the audience is muted just
Wow.
to avoid interruption. Because there's a lot of us on this call, that's the reason.
Yeah, yeah.
But I don't see any questions right now.
Okay, okay. So I'm going to, that was just kind of a snapshot of how you would see all the test results that a specific site was doing. One of those tests that we were running, as I mentioned, was wireless or a web application test. And that is ran by Selenium IDE. This is something we put into the product about a year ago, or maybe a little more. And the way it works is you can record a new project. Let's just call it Aruba. How creative is that? And then let's go to Aruba's network. And you can see we've done that one before. And let me make this full screen so you can see what I'm doing. So now the sensor, when it comes to that test in the pattern, is going to run this recording that I'm making right now every time. So let's say I want to look at support. This could be Workday. This could be something that people do every day. Here's ASP, which, by the way, you can see our licenses in ASP now. So let's say this is the recording I wanted to run. I wanted to just make sure I get to the support site. Where did it go? It disappeared. I lost my. Where's my recording? I lost it. Disappeared. Oh, okay, maybe I can get it back here. Where is my? It's like, because I'm sharing, it doesn't like my. There it is. Ah! Next thing you know, I'm going to have a bunch of people calling me because I'm on their website. Maybe to bring it up this. There it is. Okay, here's the recording. Wow. It got kind of large as I was trying to find where this was while I was still recording, but I'm going to hit stop recording. I'll call it Aruba test. And this is, let's pretend this was a working recording. So let's just test it and see. So now this is a sample of what the recording looks like, and we'll see a bunch of random screen changes while I'm here. So I can see it must be a Teams thing. It's like disappearing for me. Let me see if I can get it back here. I can see each one of these clicks that's running. So the test is running here. It'll probably start to error out on here because that wasn't meant to be there. But down here on the right, I can see now what those timestamps are for each one of those tests. So it's cool because if this was a new application or this was, something that's changed, you created this test. So you know that the test you created is the expected behavior of that application at all sites. And so if this were a new application, I could, for example, run this on all my sensors and all my sites instead of having a Monday morning where I'm running this application on all my users, so that I could then see what the behavior was. I can compare that performance across all my sites, and if it doesn't work on the Western region, then okay, I can either set that expectation with those users or start in another region that is working well and then roll it out, when we're, figure out why the network isn't performing correctly and roll it out that way. So if this wasn't working, which it's not, like even if it wasn't working and you wanted to delete something, I can delete these if I wanted to. I can delete whatever doesn't work in the middle of a test and then save it. It'll create a side file. And then the format of it would be a side. I'm sure that this will not load correctly for us, but let's just go. Where did my dashboards go? I guess I will load back in. Hang on a second in case the. Okay, so let's pull this back up. So here's the dashboard again. I don't know why I disappeared there with Teams, and let's look at one of those tests. So here's, for example, here's that test. This is the FedEx one that I talked about earlier. And I can see here's click 1, click 2, or command 2, command 3. So here's what command 1 looks like across all my sites. I hope you can read that. But I can see, in general, it's running these 3 sites here. It's about the same. There's no big spikes going on, although this one's a little bit different, but maybe one of these isn't the same and one of them's all dicey. It's like, well, why? What goes on?
I do have a question if you'd like me to
Sure.
interject. Okay, awesome. Let's see. The capabilities are great. So to run UXI, is there an appliance or a server that runs alongside? And is there a license and fees for the amount of switches and APs that are involved? And how can we get a quote for the amounts we use? So we can answer those on the sales side for sure. And thank you for the great presentation, by the way. So that's some feedback for you.
Cool. The dashboard is cloud-based. So it's all, you order the sensors and then you get a subscription with each one of those sensors, a 1, 3, or 5-year subscription, and plug them in, and this dashboard.cape networks will pop up. And you're just off and going. You don't need any servers. You don't need any other licenses. Well, I take that back. If you have, some of our sensors have cellular in them, in that if you wanted to just send a sensor out, tell someone to plug it into the wall, it will use that cellular to call home, get its configuration, and onboard the dashboard. You can also do that with DPP now as well, if you have the Aruba set up. Or I guess DPP is not the right name. What do you guys call it? We call it wireless connect. I don't know what DPP is called now. So it's just a sensor and a subscription. Then you're off running. No limitation on tests. No limitations on anything you want to do. We just do it. The average person or the average organization probably runs about 4 to 5 internal tests and about 4 to 5 or 7 external tests typically they're running, and it all kind of depends on what baseline you want to create, because you can see here, if I look at this network just to get to one of these sensors, I can see my AP association time. If I were to, I can drill down to like the last minute of that. Where did it go? Here it is. And I could gauge that between this stop and this stop, it's a 44-minute gap, because this is a dashboard that's got a lot of tests running. So I can tell how often that sensor is logging into the network and running these tests. The typical gap, or the typical baseline, is about every 7 minutes, I think, is what most people are running in a mid-sized type of account. Now, if you had 100, or we have some people with 10,000 sensors, that would probably kill something else in your network, meaning something would start to think this was a bot, another, a server or something constantly doing a DNS type of scenario. So what we've done, and that's a good segue to, this is where you set things up, but we've put gaps into it. So that's a new feature if you are using UXI, is that you can now put a gap between tests, as well as you can put a gap between the test cycle. Although the test cycle, I think, is not pushed to the dashboard yet, but I'll show you here on how we set this up as to how we can put those gaps in between tests. So I hope that answered the question. You don't need a server. You just need access to the internet, and you're good to go. So this is how you set things up. So when I wanted to, these are all the wireless networks. As you can see, it's a little extensive here. But the way you set that up is just click and add network, pull down on what it is, give it an alias, maybe I just want this one to log into 2.4 for some bizarre reason. So I could just lock that into that. V4, V6, it's just like a normal client. I'm not going to save this one, obviously, but here's my wireless network, wired, same way, just add it. It supports all the certificates that you would normally need on a, for a client logging in, because it is a Linux client. The device is meant to be a laptop or a phone or the average Joe in a room, not meant to be a Wi-Fi analyzer with a bunch of antennas and like a super powerful thing. It's meant to be just like the average guy. After you give it your networks, there's a section here where you can do groups, and you can see you have just one sensor not in a group. But this is where I could, start to drag and drop sensors into groups and see how many, the status here. I could see, like, delete it, or let's see, I can do info. I think it pulls up a map. This tells me where the sensor is physically. I can also click these and add more networks if I wanted to. So it's kind of this section here, just FYI, it's if you don't have it on your dashboard today, just click this button here. This is a 7x24 support, and just say, hey, I need to have the groups and sensors set up, and they'll enable it onto your dashboard. You can also get to all the documentation here, or any, you can ask them anything. And if they can't answer, they'll come to the engineering team or to us, the product team, and say, can you help this person out? But just to get it enabled. And the reason it's not enabled is because they have not finished working on the personas yet. So the idea is that you could create a test profile and drop it onto a group or drop it onto a sensor, similar to what you would do with your access points. That's where this is going. And when that's done, then it'll become a full-fledged thing. So I've got my networks, I've got my groups and my sensors. This is a list of all the sensors that we have, and you can see there's agents out there now as well, which we haven't gotten into that. I'll get into that afterwards. So what I would do if I wanted, there's no unconfigured ones, but if let's say this Apple Store, it's currently testing one wireless and one Ethernet, and it kind of looks like this. But if I wanted to, add to that, I would just, I can do that. I can add another wireless network here, pull down on what's been configured and add it there. I can also put, if you haven't looked at this section, this is one of the spots you can enable or disable packet capture, as well as you can put notes here that will show up in like here. So if somebody's troubleshooting or received a ticket and they want to know a little bit more about who to call or something like that, you could put those notes here and they could have access to that. So that's how that works. So I've got networks, sensors. We won't go into legacy groups, but here's where I add my tests. So I've got, in this case, all my sensors are in 16 different groups, and it looks like this. This is all going to change a little bit. This is the hardest part of the product, FYI, in that you really have to grab a beer and just sit down and go through it. So I've got all my sensors, and let's say I want to know what's being tested on the East District, which has one sensor in it, and I can see here that sensor is testing on this network. So let's say I want to know what's testing in the East District on that network, and I don't think this one's testing wireless or wired. So in this particular group, I currently have these 4 tests running, and it obviously says all sensors, because there's only one sensor in that group. If it was only running on half of the sensors or on some of the sensors, the toggle would be in the middle. And then these are the external tests that are running. You can see it's a bit way over configured. These are a lot of tests here. And if I wanted to turn something off, I could just do that and just turn it off. So now it will be disabled for that particular one. But that's how you assign tests to groups. It's I won't say it's confusing, but you just have to kind of like do it a few times and then it makes a lot of sense. But I'm always glad to help people through it and there is ways to export all this into Excel and import it into Excel or into the dashboard from Excel if we need it. If you're like in a situation where you've got a lot of groups and a lot of sensors and it's getting confusing and stuff. Thresholds are all configurable. And you'll see a lot of enhancements coming to this, in that we can, right now, thresholds are set by account, not by groups. So they're adding that caveat or that layer of thresholding to the groups as well. But they can all be configured, changed. You can see the ones that have circles here have been modified to fix the errors. I suggest when people first get their sensors to just let these thresholds sit, because most people don't know what a good DHCP response time is. So if you just let it ride with the default thresholds, kind of see what the performance is like, come up to a plan of is that acceptable or is it not acceptable, and then set your thresholds based on that. It's just a lot easier that way instead of guessing as to what's good or bad. Notifications, this is where you can mute alerts if you don't have incident detection turned on, or AIOps, and get them emailed to you if you want. This is the reports, so we can create a report, both, you could just pull it for one group, and let's see, network. That one's on this. Let's just do it for one network. I guess I selected all of them. So we got the network here, AT guess, and then I can do what is today. So it's for one. Oh wait, I think it's year 2023. And then I want to run it to, it won't run to today, it'll run to yesterday. 3/5. What was that? Let's just pull that. Reports can only be generated. Is it not me? Did I do this wrong? I must have done something wrong. No, looks like it's good. No, let's see. It's not letting me submit. Oh, maybe because I didn't give it a name. That's fine. So we'll run this and see what comes. So you'll see it. It'll pop up down here as something you can download. And it's a pretty high level report. If you were running it, if you used to have this, or if you have had this enabled for a period of time where it just spit out every Monday morning, you'll know that it's high level. It's meant to be more of an executive view on, were things better or worse than they were last week, or were before the other report that I ran. In this case, I just ran it for the one section, and I must have not picked it. Maybe I didn't pick a network that was on that one. But it'll give you incidents by type, incidents by sensor count, just high level stuff. Again, executives understand smiley faces, so that's kind of where this is going. If you wanted to run the more detailed report, then I'll show you what the data push is like. Moving on to incident detection, which we haven't got into that. So this is where if you have 20 sensors or more, the system will start to learn what's good and what's bad. And I'll show you how that works in just a few minutes. Your subscriptions are here, integrations. So this is the webhooks. So we support webhooks like ServiceNow, Slack, or we have a generic HTTP webhook if you wanted to. And that, you just generate the token and set it up that way. As well as we have, this is some examples of data push that are running, where we've just started to pull various issues on different platforms. And, the platform support just keeps coming. Everybody's got their interface that they want to support, whether it's Big Panda or Elasticsearch has a nice set of plugins for a bunch of different applications. So this is just something to play around with, and it is streaming outbound. as well as we have central integration. So if you are an Aruba central user, then we can, it's really just, and I don't know if I can even get to the central to show you what it looks like. It's really like utilizing the status API in that we will, you'll be able to see I don't know if I'll be able to get here or not. You'll be able to see the sensors from the dashboard. And let's see, now here's which one do I go to? Let's try this one.
And Bonnie, they wanted to know if there's any Teams integration as well.
There is. Let me show you that in just a second here. I must have clicked the wrong one. US West. Let's see what we see here. I may be on the wrong dashboard. I'm on the wrong dashboard. So take my word for it. You can see it from Central inbound. And let me get back here. On mine. It's like permanently kicked me off here. And let me get to this. Let me try this one.
We have a few more questions that have rolled in while you're looking for that.
Sure.
I understand there is now a UXI sensor app that can be loaded to devices such as iPhones. What licensing subscription is required to do this?
It's not available yet. You can do it. You can play with it. Let's see. This took me to another dashboard. Let's switch to let me show you that in just a second. ATM demo.
And then we have another one after that, okay?
So let's start with the teams. If I can get myself back into the dashboard. So much for trying to go out to Central. So we do have Teams test, and we're adding actually some further integration into it. Some of it via the agent that we're talking about, but if it's Teams is like a Skype test, similar to it uses an Anycast IP, and that we will show packet loss, latency, and jitter based on the call. The sensor doesn't generate a call itself. It just takes it by those measurements, with the packet tag to VoIP. So we do have that. We also have Zoom set up in that it's a little tricky to set Zoom test up in any kind of detail because of the nature of how Zoom does it. In that, so if you wanted to set up a Teams test, it's a predefined. Actually, it would just come up in one of these. Since it's already there, it's not in the pop-up list. But if you wanted to create a Zoom test, you would do it from one of these, from the web server application test. And within our help articles, it shows you how to select the IPs to test based on the particular data center or co-location that it's testing from. And Zoom just has a nature of moving that all the time. So the test could fail if the path changes, and we have ways to notify you that the path changed within the triage. So the short answer was yes, or any other generic VoIP MOS score. If you're testing some other, we have a profile for Blue Jeans. If there's something else that you're using, you could just select your target and tag the port to that, and it'll start developing a MOS score for you for that. And then the agent. Let's hold on to the agent for just a second.
Hey Bonnie, let me follow up with that because when at the time that Brandon asked that, you were talking about integrations to ServiceNow. I believe, and I could be wrong, Brandon, so I apologize, but is there any integration? I know there's probably not any integration for like you run into an issue and there's like a Aruba, like a UXI chat bot that would notify you.
Yeah, well, you could have it with just your email if you wanted it that way, or if you had it set up as let's see, where notifications. Where am I at? Where is the integrations? The generic webhook. we could use that.
Okay.
Yeah, that would.
So Brandon, that's something we would have to custom develop, but it can be done given the API integrations between both platforms.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It could be done that way, or it could be pushed to it as well. I don't know if that's reachable, but maybe we talk offline and we can go through what the target is exactly and test it out. I had somebody while I was at ATM who showed me they have their alerts going to a big picture frame that has like an old school smiley face on it. Like it filters, it like flips through and it turns red and green when he gets an alert, and then it goes to a dashboard. So it's kind of interesting. So I'm sure we can integrate it into, if that was a Teams quest that way. Sure, I'm sure that would work.
And Bonnie, let me know when you're ready for a few more questions.
Sure.
The
Why don't we
audience
take
is
them
live
now?
today. What was
Good,
that?
good. What you got?
Okay.
We'll talk about the agent in a minute.
So the next one, I don't know if you answered this one. I understand there isn't. Oh, you did. You did talk about the iPhones. Okay, the next one is there any functionality between the sensor and the software agent?
Is there any functionality between the two? So
Yes.
the software, why don't we dive into agents then? This agent today, if I have one here, I have one here. Here's an agent that's running. Here's another one. It's not. Let me pull up the other dashboard and show you, because I have a couple different ones on that one. Sorry here. Let me go to this. You can think of the agent as just another sensor on the account. In that, so here's what we have today. The Zebra agent has been out for about maybe about a year, and that I don't know if any of you have Zebra devices. They're the scanners that you use in warehouses, or retail uses them. Hospitals use them. They're Android based, and what we've done is we provide the internal and external testing to it. And because Zebra has something called wireless insights, so with that license enabled and UXI license enabled, we can run not only internal and external tests to see if applications are running, but we can test a voice call, and we can see, let me go back 30 days here, see if there's some data here. So we can see if that call completed, and if it didn't complete, we can see which end of the call where it dropped. We can also look at roaming. When there's an error in roaming, we support 802.11mc, so if you have central, you could see on a floor plan where that roam, what the path was that roam took and where it failed, from a visual perspective, which is kind of cool, because then you also see the other interferers that are in the area as well. We also can pull packet captures with the Android device, which you can't do on a generic Android. Typically, you can't do that. So those are some of the things that Zebra brings to the table. So it's a UXI sensor, very light sensor, because we don't want to impact the performance of it at all. So it won't do throughput testing. I can't run a Netflix test there. I can run a web application test, a very basic one, and I can run all the, just pinging and looking for availability or response from a server or from a test site or target that I have, in addition to the roaming piece. So that's the Zebra client, and I think there is another agent on here. We support Honeywell as well. Let me go here. I saw an agent here. Let's see.
So related to the same question really quickly. No, so loss of functionality with agent versus, so there's no loss, I'm sorry, of functionality with agent versus unit sensors.
Well, there's no loss of functionality, but an agent can only do what that device lets it do. So it's really two different worlds. And I see both of them coexisting, because you've got your sensor, it sits there, it's baselining, it's trending, you know where it's at, you know what to expect. On the agent, it's moving all the time, likely, or it's off, it's on, it's there, it's in a backpack, it's all over the place. So it's very hard to trend or baseline. So, and it can't do necessarily a packet capture, which is a pretty key component of troubleshooting things back in time. And if it wasn't there when something was happening, how do you go back in time? It just becomes very complicated to manage. But you can get device information, you can get roaming information, and some things that the sensor can't necessarily do. Like the sensor is in one spot, even when people put them on carts, because we do have a lot of people who put them on carts or robots, so they do roam, but we don't show it as a roaming event within the dashboard. So you'll see it change channels, and you'll see the channel signal strength change, but is that like a true roaming event? Sort of. So they each have their own thing. You could go out today and download a version of this agent from either ASP. It's in the support portal. I don't know, software and documentation, I think is in. Or if you went to Google Play, you could download a generic beta alpha, really, version of the agent and just play with it and see if it makes sense for you. It'll run like on a Samsung phone today, or a Honeywell device, or the Zebra, because really it's the same agent that we use on Zebra, it just doesn't have the Zebra hooks into it. And yep, iOS is coming. The Android will get out. Something that they are announced with an ATM was that the Android or the agents will have a self-service portal. That's not there yet, and it's not completed and packaged into the agent that's sitting out there today. But the nice part about that is that a user could take the first steps into troubleshooting their own situation, or at least have from their device understand the situation that they're looking at, like how are they connected, what applications are being used, things like that. I don't know if OS is going to be on there, but it will actually have. I have a document. I don't know where
So
it's
Bonnie,
at.
we also have a question regarding the ratio of sensors to the switch or AP. So basically it starts like this: how many sensors can be assigned to a switch or a group of switches per site, or when?
Okay, so think of these sensors. There's a couple different ways to take that approach. The simple that most people get to some sort of pattern on is like, for HP example, they put 4 sensors per floor. They put 1 in each corner of a corporate building, and that was just the pattern they came up with. Some people go 1 sensor per IDF, and they'll come up with that pattern. Usually, when people are first starting to use sensors, because it's kind of a different concept that they haven't really thought about, they'll buy the sensors to troubleshoot where VPs are, where there's high gathering of people, like a cafeteria, or where they do quarterly reviews, or lots of people are going to be there, or the lobby, or very visible areas. If it's a stadium, they'll put it in the ticketed agent. They'll put it, or like where the people are coming in with the tickets because they're online now, or down where the press box is, because that's always popular. Campus schools will put them in either large state where people are auditoriums type of stuff, someplace where they need to troubleshoot and they can't necessarily get there during when there's an issue. Like if it's a testing time, you don't need a tech running around in the classroom trying to troubleshoot it, right? So they'll put that sensor in the classroom where they can't necessarily go during the venue. Hospitals, same thing. They'll, because they're a 7/24 operation and they can't go to a lot of places, so they will put them in the high traffic or high risk areas where wireless or wired is critical to know. that something's happening. Does that make sense? Were there other questions?
None at this point. Thank you.
No? Okay. But on the agent, yes, we did announce it. There's one out there you could download today. If you want to sign up for the actual beta, just let us know, and we'll get you on the beta list. I think they're going to start that in 2 or 3 months, that they'll have an actual official, and it'll be Android first, I would suspect, and then MacBook, I think, is like kind of the next one. I don't know, there's going to be a Linux version of it as well, from what I understand. And then they're actually following that will be an infrastructure agent, in that agent would sit on a switch or a server or a gateway or something to that effect, giving you more of that, last hop to the ISP kind of thing. So, okay, those are good questions. And I hope that answered the how many do you want. You could do the 1 sensor for every 8 APs or 1 sensor for every 5 APs, or you can do IDF or put them where there's critical. Whatever works. There's no limitation. It's all about how quick do you want that baseline to be. So if I want to test more SSIDs than 4, then I need to add another sensor. Or if I want to run a whole bunch of tests, then I maybe need to add another sensor. It's all, if the metrics are coming through, okay, then you're good. So I don't think I finished showing how we create tests or what tests we can actually create. This is where you add tests, and here's my internal, external bucket, predefined, and then custom is, everyone will have a few predefined ones. I don't know, 2 or 3 likely. More than likely, most customers have most of their tests are customized. And if you're just thinking from a basic, we have a generic ping test. I could just ping for availability. Here's my target. Pick the target you want, and you can add a frequency to that now. Also, you can do a rate limit. So if you've got this running on, 75 sensors, don't exceed a certain, or apply that limit to it so it doesn't hit something and start to trip other parts of the network up. Web server, so now I'm going to look for response. These are pretty basic tests. Everyone has a few of these enabled. And then we've got the web app test that I told you or showed you about, and this is where you could choose a file. So here's that Aruba side file that I made earlier. And yeah, it has issues like we knew it would have. But when it did apply, it would say, how often do I want to run this? So that comes up even without the errors now. So here's where you can pick your frequency and again apply that rate limit to it. So that's this is testing through the network. So I always suggest if you can have one enabled, great. I would at least do one because I'm kind of progressively testing through the network. I've gone from a ping to an HTTP response to the web server type of test. VoIP MOS, as I mentioned before. Voice analysis, this is for Zebra, and so this would only, this is where we're going to analyze the real SIP call that the agent is making on that Zebra device, and give you that statistics on it, which I'll show you what the triage looks like in just a second. Telnet server is kind of a SSH older technology. We still see it in retail periodically, but not used much more anywhere else. LibreSpeed it's been added about a year ago, in that it's nice. It's like an iPerf test, although you can do both directions. So it doesn't have limitations of, you got iPerf 2, iPerf 3, and one does one and one does the other, but you can't do both. Plus the test is a little longer. And then this may or may not apply here, but you can select your servers, which is for international companies or global companies. It's nice because then I could select something local, or you could do it the traditional way where you specify the path. So that's a nice test that we added to it. We'll be adding some additional throughput tests, as well as I believe we're going to add the Teams test will be more detailed, and a VDI test will be coming throughout the next several months. This is the traditional iPerf 3, and then we've got iPerf 2. And if you're wondering what to test, if you think of this, if you're looking at your dashboard and if you start over here on the right-hand side to say, what do I care about? What's important, or what's coming down the pike that I need to make sure I know the experience of, or I have visibility to the performance of that application. So start here on the right-hand side with that, then go to, okay, what needs to run those services, or what needs to run the business where I'm testing? And that would be your internal test. And then you work it backwards from there, from the network perspective, and then set up your groups accordingly to, where do I want to test and that type of stuff. That's kind of how you map out what do I need to measure? What do I need KPIs on? Or if I'm using a service provider, what do I want to make sure that is working as per the contract that we have? Some people will say, for a service provider scenario, they'll say something like, okay, I want you to guarantee that you're testing, I don't know, Dropbox 5 times a day, and we're measuring that within a 5% performance of X, whatever that X is. And then the way you could see those results, you could obviously see them through the dashboard, you could see them, but you also could export that data and develop a graph, with those measurements on it. And that could just be something that is pulled once a week, once a month, or whatever the, accordance is, and you'll know if it's working or not. And again, because it sensors in the same spot, you're measuring the same thing all of the time. So I hope that made sense just now there. Let's see, anything here on the test that we needed to talk about, or anybody had any questions? I always suggest having a little bit of everything. Definitely have throughput, especially in education. If you've got, online testing and you want to measure for capacity, these throughput tests are a great way to do it. There was actually a school, I don't know if it's still available, in Australia, a school system who, in Australia, they needed to measure or guarantee certain throughput levels before they would qualify for funding. So this is a pretty old document, but they set up a test plan. They got the sensors, sent them out to all their schools, and in Australia it was pretty wide. You couldn't physically get to these schools in Perth and stuff. And they set up the parameters. They made this document here, and each sensor was running those. So they literally had somebody going from school to school to school to make sure that they were getting these sweeps to meet the requirements. So instead, the sensors just did it. And this system was called NAPLAN. That's just what that stands for in Australia. But they had the sensors do it. The sensors automatically generated a report. That report automatically went to the right people, and they knew they were in sync, and they were able to qualify for the funding. So it was as simple as that. It didn't, it doesn't have to be like a big thing. But this was a big thing to know that they were able to get the funding based on that. So, so everyone has a different scenario, and if you've got something that you want to measure and you're not sure how to do it, just ask us, and I'm sure we can walk you through it. If we haven't been through it before, we'll come up with a way. I've yet to see anybody who couldn't achieve what they wanted to with these sensors. So, and let me show you a couple reports from the dashboard, or from I don't have access to the applications per se. All of these, I don't have Elasticsearch or anything. So let me, a couple things. Let me get to, before we do that, let me show you AI Ops. I'm sorry, kind of bouncing around here. So I talked about the 20 sensors And if you have 20 sensors on the network, that we could start to give you targeted alerts. And these alerts look like, so let's say something's happening on, I don't know. Well, let's see what they are. Let's say we have something happening here for these 10 sensors. And system says, okay, this is a new event. It's happening. It just started right here at May 11th. Is that today? It's today. So it just started here, went for this period of time right here. You can see on a map where it's being impacted. And I can see here from these groups as to, it's hitting all of those groups, but St. George's, for some reason, it's only hitting to half of those groups. So maybe I care about this, maybe I don't care about it. It's only hitting one network, and then it's the one service that it's doing, and this web app is failing. So this is what the knock would get. They would get this one. A lot of people change this to say, to match, what the actual event is. So web app fail, I don't know, whatever you want to have it done. They would get one ticket like this. They could start to vote on these to say, don't send me these. When this fails, I don't want to start to receive these. And it'll start building that into the algorithm and, weed it out of the system. But so I could look at the sensors. I could drill down to the map view and see where the sensors are and get that view if I wanted to. Or I could go over here and get to the actual triage of the event. And this takes me to triage that we saw earlier of the particular event that's happening. So I wanted to mention that as well. You may be wondering what the blue is, if you notice that. The blue is that there was an event, one of these triage events, and we told you about it for a week, and you did nothing about it. So we're going to assume so that all these events don't just become noise and you don't just start to ignore them. We're going to assume you've got a plan. Either you don't care about it right now, or you're in a lockdown situation where you can't make any changes or fix something, or whatever it is. So blue means I have something happening. We're stopped telling you about it, but we're keeping that alert. So the blue is kind of like sweeping it under the rug. We said you get to it when you want to, and that's cool. It's not going to be incorporated into these alerts anymore. But something to know, and we're trying to figure out a better way to manage this because we get a lot of blue on a lot of people's systems. If, let's say, the alert was high DHCP on 15 sites, and you did nothing about it, so we stopped telling you, we turn it blue, we keep the information, the system has sort of now assumed that that's your new threshold. It's dynamically said, I'm not going to tell you again about this issue until it gets bigger and better. When that high DHCP comes back stronger, I'm going to let you know that you got an issue. So that could sort of create a false scenario in that, I really did care about it at the other threshold, but the system thinks you don't, so it's not going to tell you. So my point of mentioning that is you want to pay attention to the blue. And, a simple way to do that is if I just click on any one of these buttons, these are all the things that have kind of been sitting there making noise quietly, if you will. And I can look at them here and just start to, clean them up. Sometimes they're little things like, power outage detected. Okay, maybe I unplugged that sensor. Let's just put it back into the unconfigured sensors and we're done with that. Or association failed. Maybe that SSID is gone, or I don't know. There's some of these that could be cleaned up very easily. Some of them are very real and need to be addressed. But you don't want to forget about them just because they turn blue. And like I said, I could click on any one of these and pull up any ongoing issues that are going. It's kind of a nice cheat way to see all my issues in one scenario. Some people, what they will do is they will actually turn off AI ops. So all the blue turns red, smiley face turns not so smiley. And then they can kind of take a visual and say, okay, I need to address X, X, and X. And then they turn AI apps back on and let it, continue to do its thing. So a couple different ways to measure that. So wanted to make sure people know about that feature because it is really nice to have. Let's see. These are some of the new things. I was going to show you guys some of the reports, but for the users, this is, you can now, any of you could go generate, onboard it. If you wanted to onboard a Zebra agent, you can just, or the Android agent, just go out there, download it, scan the QR code, and then create a dashboard. We'll issue you a temporary key, license key to get you going as a POC, and then you're good to go. So just FYI on that. And then let me get down to the reports. This is what the map view looks like that I mentioned with the Zebra, and that you could see the roaming. I'm hoping someday we could do this with the sensors as well. You can see them on the map in Central, but not from an error perspective. And this is just if you have the older Zebras. So apps we just covered. And we talked about this. This is the filters, which if you haven't taken a look at that, it is a really useful little tool. Oh yeah, we have the AP name now. We didn't have that 6 months ago or so. And the service rate limiting I talked about. I'm really getting to the reports. Oh yeah, we did change the behavior of ping tests now, and that we actually do tell you about it. And if that's a problem, just go to the help button and we can turn it off for you. Easy Connect we talked about. Host name, if you guys are using it in Central, you can see it now. And oh yes, you can sort your groups. And I really will get to, we have something called cross-customer outage. Let's say UXI sees a Facebook outage and it's seeing it on 5,000 of our customers. We're trying to automate this and create a page within UXI, but today we just send out a notification via Yammer and LinkedIn. There's another notification they do. I think they'll make it a note so that you can, because if there's a Facebook outage, the nice piece is that you'll see Facebook test is red. All of your internal services will still be green, and the groups that are testing Facebook will be red. So you can quickly, just by a glance at the dashboard, say, this is nothing I can really control. Facebook is having an outage. It's impacting these groups, but my network is good. So, I can only do so much. I can notify people that, hey, it's a Facebook outage. But in addition, we'll let you know that, it's not just you having a Facebook outage. It's, the whole western half of the U.S. or the eastern half or whatever it is. So, so you'll start to see that. And because, we see it across all customers, we can start to pinpoint that stuff. So that's there. Where is the reports? Sorry, I didn't know they were quite so. If we have central users, this is a way that we've had people measure for change validation. And this is in the AI Insights, the recommendations. If you're, AI Insights will recommend X. Okay, so I see that on the sensor before I make the change via what, AI Insights said, and here's what my measurements are after. So that's just one of the ways to use it. The same with SD-WAN environments. If you're moving to an SD-WAN environment, people use the sensors because how do I know what I'm measuring if I don't know from a client's perspective what the performance metrics are? So I can start to put the sensor out first, make the change to the SD-WAN, and then measure it during and after to see if I'm meeting the SLAs that I expect to, because the way SD-WAN, it's not necessarily measuring from the end user's perspective, just like the network. It's taking in the data from the application itself, but to pinpoint the root cause is tricky for an SD-WAN world. So just think about it. Here's some of the reports. So this isn't just some screenshots. This is Elasticsearch. I kind of screwed in a little bit, but of AP association over time that somebody was running, and this, so where we've got the various sites, and we're starting to measure that, as well as this is where we've had people that run 3 or 4 different kinds of web application tests and measure what the performance is of those tests over time. So just a little example of different ways to use the data. And they're not hard to set up if you have access to the containers. And I won't go into the roaming cases, but this is all with central stuff. Yeah, I think that is kind of what I have. What did I miss? Anybody? It's kind of jumping around there, so. Did I show you what these screens were for? These are my kind of looking at things from a deployment perspective. You can see here I've got these sensors that are not deployed. I could get to my sensor detail from here. Well, a lot of times people will have a NOC view going. It'll be circling through this, the map view, and then this, and it just kind of rotates through to show, everyone's got their preference on how they want to see things. Then we have a few customers who don't use a dashboard at all. They just use the alerts, and they have their own system, or they have multiple systems. They'll have the NOC has one team, then there's the NetOps folks who have another view that they want, and everybody has their own choice of views. You could filter. This is an underutilized piece of the product. If you have sensors today, maybe I just want to see all my sensors that are in information state. So here's all the sensors that have been receiving alerts that I haven't done anything with, and you can see the bulk of them is this FedEx and Google test that's happening. So this is really handy when you're trying to troubleshoot things. I could look at just groups, or I can look at just a particular network, maybe this ATM network here, all the sensors that are testing that particular network. It's not as telling here because this is a demo site. Everything's on everything, but filters really come in handy when you're trying to narrow down where something's happening. So if you haven't used it, highly suggest you play around with it a little bit. What else? Any other questions? I've kind of come to the end of what I have.
We don't have any other questions, just compliments. They enjoyed your presentation.
Oh, good. Good. Yeah. How are you guys? If any of you have UXI, maybe you can put it in chat. I can stop presenting here and see how are you using it today. That's something I'd be curious if there's any users on here. Maybe they're not.
Well, I say we give them back some time in their day-to-day, and
you
did a wonderful time. I came up with a general amount of time, allotment of time. So it doesn't mean that was necessary with your solution. Maybe you were just so efficient that we got through it quickly, and that's a good thing. So thank you very much. I want to thank. Oh, go ahead, Bonnie. I apologize.
No. Well, you're all good. All good.
So I want to thank everybody for participating in this event. I have seen multiple registrations, and you guys are committed to these trainings. So we will definitely continue and provide additional trainings. We're hoping to do this once every quarter, and it's been a success. So I think that will be able to happen. Just want to let you know that we are going to be sending out a recording of the session so that you can go back and recap. And the other thing that we're going to do is we are hoping that you will provide your valuable feedback We want to make sure that we're touching on the points that are most relevant to you, and that we're able to answer those questions and help you move forward with your technology projects. Without further ado, I guess we'll leave at this point, and we thank you very much for joining, and we hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day today and a wonderful weekend. And Bonnie, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.